Have you ever experienced a glitch in the Matrix? If so, consider sending it my way. Just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. Before I get into this glitch story, I want to say that I have been haunted by weird things pretty much my entire life. I may share some of my other stories with you at some point, but I have seriously had to deal with weird things happening to me since I was a child. They haven't always been glitches. Some of them have been pretty obviously paranormal, but these weird events are always the ones that get to me. This specific event is just the most recent one to happen to me, and it's one that seems to be the biggest change in my reality. I've been a delivery driver for a store that does floral arrangements for quite a few years now. I also help put together the arrangements, help out in the store, but my main job is deliveries. It may sound like a bit of a weird job and one that most people wouldn't think to be a busy job, but the funeral homes order their flower arrangements from somewhere, and there are funerals every day. So I can tell you that we do get a lot of business. On top of that, some businesses like to order small arrangements for their front desks, and we also had one client that had been consistent for years. She's actually the one that the story is about. But I want to tell you a bit more about her before we get into the story. Norma Jean was, at the time of this story, in her mid-90s. I think she was 94 to be exact, but I can't be certain on that. Norma had been getting flowers from our shop for 25 years, almost the entire time the store had done deliveries, and that started because her husband had wanted to get her flowers, and he'd actually contacted the original owner of the store to set up an arrangement for them to be delivered every 2 weeks to Norma. He hadn't prepaid or anything. He was paying when they were set up and sent out. But he had done this for about 20 years, until he passed away in 2016. Her husband had actually spoken to the owner not too long before he passed away, and asked if there was any way he could continue to have the flowers sent to her after his passing. If maybe there was some way he could prepay, and the owner promised him that she would continue sending them, and that he didn't have to worry about paying for them. I'm mentioning this because this was, obviously, the sweetest and saddest story that I've ever heard, and I was always so happy when the 2 weeks was up, and I got to deliver more flowers to Norma Jean. It was always such a pleasure to knock on her door and say, "I have a flower delivery for Norma Jean from Ronald," because her eyes would always light up when I said it. Now, I've been making this delivery, as mentioned, every 2 weeks for about 4 years, with some exceptions for when I was out sick or just not working that day. If you do the math on that, I've done this delivery approximately 180 times. So, I know Norma Jean pretty well. Over the past couple of years, I will say that she changed a slight bit, and that she wasn't very talkative anymore. She would just take her flowers and say thank you, and that would be the whole conversation. It's okay, I get it. With everything going on, it was possible that she just didn't want to be social, and I respected that. Now, on to the glitch that happened. About 2 months ago, it was time for me to do my delivery to Norma Jean. I got the flowers arranged, got everything in the van, and I headed toward her lovely little house so that I could make her morning better. However, when I pulled up, I noticed that her front yard looked different. For some reason, I couldn't really put words to what was different, and part of me thinks that this may be part of the glitch. Something about it was different, but my brain cannot, for whatever reason, parse out the information on what exactly is different. It's just that something is completely wrong with how it looks. I shook this off, thinking that it was just something weird at first, but then I got up to the door and rang the bell. An older woman, younger than Norma, with curly, graying red hair, answered the door. My first thought was that this could have been Norma Jean's daughter or something. I've never met any of her kids, but she had mentioned them in the past. Of course, my mind immediately went to the worst place. I thought maybe something had happened to Norma and her kids were there to help her, or worse. I went ahead with my normal greeting of flower delivery for Norma Jean from Ronald, and the woman lit up just as Norma would have. She reached out for the flowers, and she said that they were absolutely lovely this week and thanked me for always being so kind when I dropped them off. I then asked if Norma was around or if she was okay, and this woman looked at me like I was crazy. She kind of shook her head and said, "What do you mean? I'm right here." This woman was at least 15 years younger than Norma. There was no way that she was in her 90s, and she looked nothing like I remember Norma looking. On top of that, her voice was way more energetic, and she was way more talkative. I even questioned her a bit, saying, "Wait, you're Norma?" And she started asking me if I was okay. She'd mentioned that I'd been bringing her flowers for something like 4 years now, and she was confused why I didn't recognize her on that day. I told her that I just must be off and that I was fine. I tried to play it off as best I could, but I could tell that she was confused as to what I was going on about. I told her to have a lovely day, and I went back to my van and headed back to the shop. As soon as I got back, I mentioned to the owner that someone else had answered the door for Norma, and that she said she was Norma. We talked about it for a bit. I described the woman, and she told me that the woman that answered the door was, in fact, Norma. I then mentioned the little old lady that I was used to seeing, and she was confused, because based on the description that I was giving, I was talking about Norma's mother. I said that I must have been giving the flowers to her mother the whole time then, and she then mentioned to me that that was impossible, because Norma's mother died in 1997, which was when the owner met Ronald and Norma. She did the entire flower arrangement for the funeral. That was how the store had actually gotten Ronald's business. He thought that the arrangements were so beautiful that he wanted to get the flowers for Norma Jean to try to keep her in high spirits after the passing of her mother. She even showed me a picture that she had of them from a year or two later, and the woman in the photograph looked a lot closer to this new Norma Jean that I had met that day. So, I guess that's my latest glitch. The Norma Jean that I knew was apparently somehow Norma Jean's mother, and not the real Norma. But the woman that's been answering the door to me for the last 4 years has been dead since the late 90s. I really don't know how to explain this beyond it being a really weird shift in reality, or glitch, or something. But it's probably one of the weirdest things that I've ever experienced, and I really don't know how to take it. I will add that I have done this delivery a couple more times since this change, and this new Norma is very kind, and she knows me by name, she knows my girlfriend's name, and several other things about me that I've spoken about to Norma. So I have to believe that this is the Norma Jean that I've been delivering to for a few years now. I have no explanation for this, and I'm open to any comments. But as it is now, I just have to accept that the Norma Jean I knew is no longer with us. And just keep bringing the flowers to this new Norma Jean. So, I joined this sub because something weird happened to me a couple of nights ago, and it's been bothering me ever since. I know it's not the craziest or scariest story ever, but it's just plain weird. So, a few nights ago, I was in my room with my laptop just watching some videos on YouTube, and I had a random thought about my flashlight, because I had the lights off and my room is really dark. It's one of those super bright lights that runs on a high-powered battery. I remember that I kept it on my dresser, but when I went to look for it, it was gone. I recently moved my dresser across the room, so I thought maybe it fell behind it. But when I checked, I didn't see it. I thought, oh well, I'll look for it some other time. I have a small fridge in my room next to my bed. The only thing I have on top of it is my remote and sometimes a bottle of water. The next night, I was doing the same as I mentioned above, but this time, I went to get the water out of my fridge, and lo and behold, my flashlight was sitting upright on the fridge. I know it wasn't there before because I would have surely seen it. I looked all over my room for it the night before that. Not intently, but I definitely looked at the fridge and only the remote and water bottle were on top of it. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. I know that I didn't put it there myself. I would have certainly remembered since I had been looking for it. Like I said, it's not the craziest story, but it is my first so-called glitch story. And thank you for reading. I had a really weird glitch happen to me about a week or so ago, and I've been wanting to share it. I just haven't had the time to do so until now. I'm not sure if it's a glitch where I saw the future, or if it's a glitch where reality repeated or something like that, but it's definitely an unexplainable thing that happened. Maybe someone can tell me what it was, but for me it's still one of those I have no idea what the hell this was moments. So, this happened one morning while I was at home. At the moment, I don't have a car. It snowed around me not too long ago, and I actually got into an accident. That wasn't my fault, and my car was completely totaled. I'm currently in the waiting phase of everything to come through so that I can get a new one. Until then, I'm dependent upon my father coming to get me to do the things that I need to do, and thankfully he lives about 15 minutes away, and he's more than willing to help out. Plus, I'm currently working from home, so I can get away with not having a car a bit easier than most people. On this particular morning, I was needing to go to the post office to ship something to my work's home office, and was also needing to go to the grocery store for just a couple of things. So I asked him if he could be there at around 11 so that I could take my hour lunch to go do what I needed to do and make it back at a decent time. At around 10:40, I got a text from him saying, "Hey, I'm on my way. I should be there in about 20 minutes. He tends to send something like this when he's on his way, which is always funny to me because I know he's going to take 20 minutes to get here, so he doesn't need to say it. At this point, I'm not really doing anything for work as it was a slow day, so after about 10 minutes, I wrap up what I was doing and lock my system. I step away, put on real pants, grab my coat, hat, and gloves and get ready to step outside into the cold to wait for the last 5 minutes or so. I have to say that at no point in time during all this did I look at my cell phone. That's important for what happened. I step out my front door, lock it up, and I sit in the chair that's on my front porch just waiting for my dad to pull up at any minute. After a couple of moments, I feel my phone vibrate in my pocket. I think that it's probably my dad texting me to say he'll be a couple more minutes for whatever reason, but when I opened my phone and looked at it, I was utterly confused. The message I had just got said, "Hey, I'm on my way. I should be there in about 20 minutes." The text was completely identical to the one from earlier, but the one from earlier wasn't there. I read it confused for a moment, but then thought that maybe he had double sent it, or maybe it got sent again for whatever reason. But then I looked up at the time, and it was 10:40. That was impossible. He originally texted me at 10:40 saying he was on his way. I then spent several minutes working at my computer before getting up, getting dressed, and getting bundled up to go outside. I had then sat there for a few minutes, and yet it was still 10:40? Or it was 10:40 again? I actually called my dad at that moment, and when he answered, I asked if he had left a while back or if he had just left. And he confirmed that he was actually pulling out of the driveway at that moment. I basically just told him that I would see him soon and hung up. I just kind of stared blankly at my phone until he pulled up, the full 20 minutes. He showed up, we did what we needed to do, and I got back with the few minutes to spare. No other issues or events occurred that were abnormal. I really have no idea what exactly happened here. I know that he texted me at 10:40, then I spent some time doing some things before I went outside to wait, and yet, after all that time, it was still the same time, and he had just sent that text. I really don't know, but it's been something that's been confusing to me since it happened. Last summer, a friend, I'll call them BM, and I were bored, and as bored teenagers do, we decided to roam around the downtown area of BM's town. In this area, there's a train track that runs right through the middle, although very little of it runs through a populated area. These tracks are only used by cargo trains that run through at night, and even then there are very few. So, we started walking on them. We went north, a direction neither of us has ever gone on these tracks, but we didn't pass by any place that a train could enter onto the tracks. Important detail for later. After leaving the busier part of the downtown, the tracks quickly became unusable, covered in broken glass and metalwork, plants reclaiming them, and a huge pile of sizable rocks that were dumped on top of the tracks for reasons unknown. At the end of the track, we stumbled upon what looked like to be an area for the train cars to be loaded with supplies without having to remove them from the tracks, which was where the pile of rocks was. We hung around that area for a moment before going back the way that we came. Right before we reached the place that we started, a train horn honked and BM and I quickly got off the tracks. The train appeared to be stopped, and we could only see its big headlight and barely make out the front car from our distance, but we both knew that it was a train. In between us and the train, there was a road that had guardrails and train crossing signs. BM and I heard the dinging that sounds when the guardrails are going down, but the train still wasn't coming. Neither of us had our phones on us, bad move for walking on tracks, I know, so we couldn't see how long we were waiting for the train to pass. But we knew that it had to be longer than 10 minutes. It was a sweltering day, and we weren't too keen on waiting any longer, so we walked back to the place where the road intersected with the tracks to avoid being mowed down if the train ever decided to get moving. We made it off safely and walked back to BM's car, our entire journey within view of the tracks. It wasn't until the next day, when I was thinking over the events, that I realized that that situation had multiple plot holes. One, we never heard the train approach, nor was there any area where it could have gotten on those tracks at that point. It also takes a train a very long distance to stop, even when going slowly, and the distance between where we were and the north end of the tracks wasn't sufficient. Two, we saw cars moving across the track road intersection even after we supposedly heard the guardrails being lowered, nor did we see them lowered when we passed, which means they must have gone up. But it wouldn't make sense for them to go up when there was a train right there. I do suffer from hallucinations, but I highly doubt that I implemented a false memory or something else into BM's mind when they were able to recite details that I witnessed before I said them. The same day I thought all this over, BM and I went through every logical possibility, but everything was ruled out. I don't know how much I believe glitches in the Matrix in real life and that sort of stuff, but that was what we decided to chalk this up to. This actually happened just last month. Me and my partner, Kara, our anniversary was in October, and as a gift, she got me these beautiful earrings. It looked like a bird's nest that sat on your ear, and then there were small chains that went down it with small bluebirds attached to it, and the part that goes through your ear and the chain were silver. I adore birds and actually have 2 macaws that I rescued, so they really meant a lot to me. I wore them every chance I got it, and even considered wearing them to our friend's birthday/Christmas party. Kara talked me out of it, though, because she knew that her parties tended to get a little out of hand, especially when people started drinking. I don't drink myself, but you can't really control other people's actions. I agreed with her, though, and decided to go with some plain blue plugs instead, so that way there was little to no chance they could fall out or get ripped out. So, the party went great, and just as we expected. Some people had a bit too much, a couple people did get into fights, and I also ended up having to help carry someone to bed. But otherwise, it was a lot of fun. I was the designated driver, so I took one of our friends home, and then me and Kara went home. I specifically remember taking off my necklace, taking out my plugs, and placing them in the jewelry dish on my vanity. Then, as normal, we got ready for bed and were asleep within the hour. The next day, we just lounged around the house with neither of us doing more than eating and watching something on Hulu. The day after that, however, we were going to her parents' place for their Christmas get-together, so I was dressing up. I had on a nice light blue dress, and when I went to put on my bird earrings, they were gone. I have a jewelry holder for all my hoops and dangling earrings, and they just weren't there. I thought maybe I was just being lazy and didn't put them back where I normally put them, but they weren't in the tray that my studs were in either. I checked all over my vanity and even in odd places like the bathroom, the living room, the kitchen. They were nowhere to be found. Kara noticed my concerned look and asked what was going on, and she even agreed that she saw me hang them up after deciding not to wear them to the party 2 days ago. This at least reassured me that I wasn't mistaken about where I put them, and that I did not wear them to the party. In fact, the blue plugs I had in were still in the tray where I took them off after the party. After both of us searched extensively, we had to stop because we had to go to her parents. Unfortunately, my mind was stuck on those earrings, worried that I had lost them. They were gorgeous, and I had just gotten them, and I felt awful thinking about the fact that I had possibly lost them. After we got home, I looked again all over and even pulled out my vanity, the bed, and the dresser, thinking just maybe they fell behind it somehow, sadly, I never found them. I know they were just earrings and Kara wasn't even upset about it, but I was devastated that they were missing and was kicking myself for losing them. So, fast forward to the 23rd, both previous parties were the week before Christmas. Our friend that had the birthday party texted me with a picture asking if I had left these earrings at her house. I kid you not, they looked just like my bird earrings. The only difference was that the birds were a lavender color instead of blue. I discussed this with her and she said she was pretty certain they had to be mine because she checked with the only other 3 girls that were there that had their ears pierced, and they said that they weren't theirs. She even messaged someone else if they recognized them, but they didn't have theirs pierced and they said no. She said she didn't remember what I was wearing, but I had taken a picture with Ash that night at the party where you could clearly see my right ear, and the plug was there. There would be no possible way for me to have one set in, take a picture, and then just change them. For what reason? And just taking them or carrying them around wouldn't make sense, because I could have broken something. So, since no one else claimed them, she gave them to me. Kara was even confused because she knows for a fact that she got the blue ones because they looked like my macaws. She wouldn't have gotten lavender ones. So, I started coming up with a weird theory though. The holder I use for my earrings has 4 stands. My friend who had the party was looking for a new way to store and display hers, and I split mine in half so we both could use it. There were several slots just on one side, so there's no way that I was going to fill it up anytime soon. So, I thought I might as well give it to someone who would. She stores all of her earrings and even some bracelets on hers. In November, she stayed with us for a weekend, and after she left, I noticed a bracelet on mine that I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was weird that she would store her jewelry in my room and on my vanity, but then I just assumed that maybe she thought it would be safer there. However, when I asked her about it, she was confused, because she mentioned the clasp on the bracelet broke and she never got around to fixing it, so it had been just sitting in her jewelry box. Why would she bring over a broken bracelet? Again, we just chalked it up to being weird, and thought maybe she was mistaken and took the bracelet back. So, at this point, I'm not convinced that there's not something up with that jewelry holder. Like, somehow it's connected still, even though we split it up, and somehow it's able to find, fix, or change things. I'm gonna keep an eye on it now, and I'll be sure to share if anything else happens. This one is a bit odd, and I'm not really sure what is happening at all. I'd like to start at the beginning. I moved into this rental home about 3 years ago. It had a lot of remodeling before we moved in. It still needs some work, but for the most part, it's a pretty good place to live. While the landlords were doing some work, they realized that one of the garage door openers were broken, so they replaced it. But, of course, in the middle of all the work, they lost the remote. It is a 2-car garage, and I only use the opener with the new one, since the other door has an opener on it from the 90s. It still works, but I cannot get an opener for it. The main door has a garage door opener button next to it, but it's from the older opener, and the one for the brand new one is right next to the garage door, so you can't hit it while leaving by mistake. About a year ago, I started parking my car in the garage. I went to the hardware store and bought a remote for my door. I did try it on the older model first, cause I did want to use that door, but it didn't work, so plans changed. I got the remote working, everything was good, and I had my nice old beat-up car in the garage. A few months pass by, and I walk out to go to work, and the garage door is wide open. I stopped dead and looked at it. My keys sit in a metal container on a little table. It wasn't somewhere where you could easily press the button. I got to work, close the door, and come home to find it is still closed. So, I just assumed that one of the people I live with left it up by mistake or something. We do put our trash out that way, so someone else needing to use the door did make sense. It stays closed until about a month later, and I find it open once again. This time I asked everyone in the house if they opened the door when I got back from work. No one used that garage door to put any trash out that night. So, I decided to move my keys to a different place, where it's a metal container with a lid, in case everyone else's keys were pressing a button or something by mistake, since we all place our keys together. A month or two later, the door is open once more. Now, I've been good at keeping my keys in the new place. No one else touched that container, and even if my landlord had the remote and were playing a trick or something, they live in another city. There is one of those slide locks at the bottom that keeps the door from going up even if you use a remote, and I slid that into place when I got home now, but I still don't get what's happening here. No one could be pressing the buttons by accident anymore. It's just weirding me out. And I hope this stops, but if it doesn't, that lock will keep it closed. Unless it somehow glitches too. This may not be a typical glitch story, but it's like the Matrix was warning me about what would happen over the next week. This happened when I was in 8th grade. My first class was history, and as class started, I took my zip-up binder, and when I grabbed the zipper, I realized that there was a paperclip bent into the shape of a U attached to the zipper. Given that it was in the morning that it was there, I realized that if someone did put it there, it would have been the school day before. On the other hand, I would have noticed if it was there because I would use my binder in basically every class, and where I went, it went. I don't remember if I did any homework or would have used my binder after school, so I'm at a loss of when it got there. And since I sat in the front row of class the day that I noticed it, it's not like anyone in front of me could have put it there. I took off the paperclip and put it in my pencil bag for safekeeping. A couple days after that, during study hall, I went to practice my flute in one of the small practice rooms attached to the band room. I always used the same practice room out of habit. There was also a bookshelf type thing in the room that had peeling paint that I would sometimes pick at when I was bored. This day was no different. As I got bored and turned to pick at the paint, where I was greeted with the paperclip bent in the shape of an M. I kept that one as well. I thought that it was odd that I found another bent paperclip, but I rationalized it to middle schoolers love doing that sort of thing. Until a few days later, after the fact, my Uncle Mike, who was sick and in the hospital, passed away. Uncle Mike. U and M. I know it sounds like such a far-fetched coincidence, but both items were at the right time and place for me to find them. I truly get goosebumps when I pieced that all together, and I'm still thinking about it 5 years later. So that was this week's Glitch in the Matrix collection, a collection of glitch stories that show just how strange things can be in this reality of ours. Some really weird stories this week, as always. Hopefully some stories that you all enjoyed. Hopefully 2 days into the new year, you're having a good year. Guess I should be a little more personable in this outro, huh? I'm having an okay year so far. Again, it's only been about 48 hours, but, you know, is what it is. Can't really judge a full year on 2 days. Of course, this will be a great year. Even if the first few days isn't great, the rest of the year will be great. I promise you that. One way or another, it will be a good time. Now, if you liked these stories and want to show the support for the channel, hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, hit that subscribe button. If you really, really want to show your support, you can leave me a comment. And this is where we shall segue into that whole comment thing. Last week, the week before, I asked you to leave me a sentence or a comment telling me what thing you want to manifest in 2023. Several of you did. And on the screen now and several minutes before now is the list, the collection of comments for those who wish to manifest something for 2023. Thank you. Visualizing, setting that goal, attempting to manifest it is the best way to start down that path. Hopefully, each and every single one of you gets what you hoped for in 2023. And thank you. Now, back to the words of the week. This week, the word is habit. Habit, which is a recurrent, often unconscious pattern of behavior that is acquired through frequent repetition, an established disposition of the mind or character, customary manner of practice, etc., etc. A habit. Something you do out of habit. For instance, for me, it is a habit to end my videos the same way. It is also habitual behavior for me to make mistakes in my outros and not cut them out. Because I'm not a professional at this. I just do what I do. Anyways, I hope you all are having a beautiful day. I hope I do see you again soon, but until then, my friends, you're loved, you're valid, you're important. The best you that you can be. And until I do see you again, much love and sleep well.